Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining today for our webinar, Unlocking the Power of PIM. I am solo today. Our usual host, co-host Robbie, is busy today. So I'll do my very best to keep up with the Q&A, keep up with the chat. Again, please make sure you use the Q&A feature if you have any questions. I will do my best to get to them as we get through today's presentation. Again, it is going to be recorded, so I'll be sent a copy of this after the talk for you to flick back and forth. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to anybody from Augment or me directly. Again, for those of you just joining us now, the conversation of today's webinar, Unlocking the Power of PIM, Secure Access for MSPs. My name is David Haynes. If you haven't met yet at a previous webinar, I'm the information security officer here at Augment. I spend a lot of times talking with MSPs and working with them around Microsoft best practices and how Augment fits into that, but also how one area that we see a lot of is MSPs have the licensing for PIM, but not understand exactly how to best implement it or even what it is in terms of the security value. So I want to spend some time to get into that today. This is building off of the webinar that we did last month, which was all about GDAP and security best practices. So there's going to be some information that gets doubled up from last month. But if you find that it's too brief from today, go back and watch our previous webinar, or again, reach out either in the chat or by email afterwards. So the agenda, going over what is PIM, and then how is PIM, how to actually do it. There's going to be a demo afterwards where I'm actually going to go into Entra and hope that it cooperates with me and show you how to actually set it up in Microsoft and the Partner Center and answer any, and then there's going to be a Q&A afterwards where if there's any questions, we'll get to them there. I will try to get to them as we go as well. But again, I am running this solo. So I'm trying to keep everything in focus as best I can. So, bit of a recap from our previous webinar. If you missed it, again, security is all about defense in depth. You can see here we have a walled fortress city with many different castles inside from our previous webinar. This was an allusion to each castle being an Entra environment. As an MSP with GDAP, you need to think of yourselves as like a walled city with many cities inside of you. You want to make sure you are as protected as possible. And I think that the way in which PIM interacts to help build your defense in depth and least privileged or zero trust principles and just-in-time permissions is a core component to that deserves a deep explanation. Because again, it's not a when you get breached. It's not an if, it's a when. In my opinion, if you're in business for long enough, there's always going to be some sort of security incident that's going to happen. Just the way of things. If you aren't familiar with what this picture is, this is the walled city of Babylon. Again, a real life example of the previous picture. You can see if the attackers get through the wall, it's a maze inside. It's really hard for them to navigate and find their way around to the valuable spots. And for an MSP, that's going to be your customer base and your customers' data. So PIM is the topic for today. So what is PIM? Privileged Identity Management. It's a component within Microsoft Entra ID to help you securely manage, control, and monitor access to important resources. Now, those would be the roles internally to your Entra environment. But in the focus of today, it's going to be around security group management and M365 groups for that permission to get into your customer's environment, and the way in which Microsoft really wants MSPs to start considering and adjusting their workflow to. So that's going to be where we're going to get to today. Values of PIM, again, like I've mentioned a few times now, just-in-time permissions to Entra ID and Azure resources, requiring that justification for why they need a user needs those permissions, the time-bound nature of that, so that way you don't have someone with permanent role assignment to a high-privileged role that they don't need all the time, being notified of when someone takes those permissions. and whether or not you need an approval for that request. That's configurable within PIM based on the way in which you configure it. Um, if you're doing any compliance work, CMMC, ISO, SOC 2, NIST, if you're trying to get yourself to any framework, access reviews and audit history is a really important one, especially around the least privileged access components to those frameworks. Being able to identify whether or not Robert at your company do they have the roles that they need, and are they using the roles that they have? Um, is a big component to the compliance to those different frameworks. And then also getting that MFA, a new MFA claim during that authentication process. So that way, if there's ever any token theft, the attacker is still forced to get a new MFA claim, just adding that an additional layer of security. Again, kind of mentioned it on that last slide, but 74, according to a 2023 report from Verizon, 74% of security breaches are linked to privilege misuse or over permissioning. If you have a level 1 tech who has global administrator access into all of your environments, and they get their account gets breached, all of a sudden someone has global admin access into everybody's environment. That was one of the big reasons why Microsoft has made that shift from DAP to GDAP, the granular delegated admin permissions, is because they wanted to make it easy for people to provide the least privileged access that their team needs into their customer's environment. And we went deep into GDAP and securing that in the last webinar, but we'll touch base on that in a few more slides here. It's also talks about the many different challenges that I'm sure you're all very familiar with, managing multiple tenants with multiple technicians. If I was going to try to breach a dental clinic, I wouldn't go after the dental clinic. I would go after an MSP managing many dental clinics, because if I can breach you, I can breach many other tenants. The audit complexity across different customer environments. What I mean by that is determining who's done what where. Makes it a lot using PIM makes it a lot easier because there's built-in audit tools to see who's accessing what permissions. And it's much easier to demonstrate security best practices, not just to clients, but to any third-party auditing that you're doing for any of your compliance requirements. The big component for PIM that I mentioned a number of times, where I'm going to spend most of my time on the demo today, is the concept of just-in-time permissions. Similar to a teller at a bank, they don't have the key to the security deposit boxes on their person at all times. They have to go and they have to request those keys from a manager, who then gets them the key so they could then go access the security deposit box. It's the same concept here, just in the digital space with the roles and security groups. So zero standing privileges, that is that concept of no permanent access to those privileges, having them time bound, and having that time bound tied to the general scope of what the use of those roles are for. If someone's going in to do a password doing some password resets, or maybe they're doing some user management, they're onboarding a few new employees, maybe they only need permissions for an hour, or maybe it's 4 hours. It's a conversation that you have internally with your team to sort of set those boundaries. But having those time bounds, that way nobody can forget to return the keys to the safety deposit box, leaving their account potentially vulnerable. Least privileged, I'm sure you're going to be tired of hearing me say that over the next 30-40 minutes here. But then the auditable trail of events: who's doing what, when, who approved it, what was the justification given for requesting those permissions, is all configurable within the way in which you set up the PIM for each security group. And when we get to actually the demo, I'll show you the various different configurations you have there. In short, so you can kind of understand how it works for a MSP's workflow. User requests privileged access. That request can either be pre-approved based off the policy or set up to be reviewed by an administrator. You can have the user provide MFA, a justification, and like I said, potentially get an approval. After the approval, the user has those permissions. They can access the partner's environment just like they would through the partner center previously. And then after a fixed time, access is automatically revoked. Um, Again, some useful examples. If you see Jared all of a sudden make a PIM request for permissions at 2 in the morning, you check your email. Oh, that shouldn't be happening. You know something's going on with that account. Gives you that visibility into who's doing what and when. Um, and part of your access review process for, again, any of these compliance measures is going to be determining, do people have the roles that they need to do their job, and are we over provisioning anybody, and if so, how can we scale that back? And PIM makes it really easy to track that. So the way in which it kind of comes back into the partner center, this is going to be a bit of a rehash from our previous webinar. But again, GDAP in the partner center was built in a way to provide the least privileged access, again, following that zero trust protocol, into your customer's environment for both granular and time-bound access. Microsoft really wants to get the entire industry moving away from shared accounts into your customer's environment, or individual user accounts in your customer's environment for your MSP techs. They really don't want you to have your GDAP relationships configured with all 73 roles, including global administrator. You'll notice when you're building up the relationship, if you set up global administrator included, um, auto extension isn't enabled. So they really don't want you using that. And they really want you focusing on what is it that we as a service provider are actually going to be servicing for our customers, and being specific that way. Some of the values, both the partner and the customer can terminate access at any time. But the big one is delegating the permissions in like smartly, across your organization through security groups. And then again, an additional layer of security on top of that is how you set up PIM to control who gets access to what and what are the steps required to actually get that access. Um, Now, if you're thinking, oh, this seems like a lot of work, for our technicians to get up to speed on and actually implement it into their workflow, it's as complicated as you want it to be, and it really doesn't add. The idea is to add enough value on the security front to make the few minute delays acceptable, to your team. It's not supposed to be a huge roadblock there. So again, yeah, for recap, GDAP architecture, you have the MSP tenant, which has all of the security groups that we're talking about. Now, again, these security groups live in your tenant. They're disconnected from your customers' Entra environments. You create the GDAP relationship link and you send it off to the customer with the specific roles that you've determined that you need. The client then receives it and assigns or accepts those roles, and then you can assign the security groups to the relationship, and then within that assign the roles that are in the relationship to the security groups. And then PIM comes in at the very end. It controls who gets access to those security groups, when and how. The number one thing that I see MSPs work on, or in my opinion need guidance on, is this process here. I see many relationships, where they've just said the people have skipped doing this work of actually identifying what it is that your team does and requesting just those permissions. You can go into the partner center, request all roles, send that relationship link off. And I mean, it's efficient. It gets you access now, but it doesn't follow that least privilege access um, security philosophy. It's not how Microsoft wants you to be using GDAP. And there's just it makes it a lot harder to manage once you start focusing on these security principles. Another example that I like to use ideas that if you request all of these permissions and you have a customer and you've sold yourself as a service, we're going to manage your Entra, and your security configuration, your user provisioning, all of your licenses, password management, focus strictly on Entra, but you have also requested like Power BI administrator or Dynamics administrator or SharePoint administrator. Um, Now you have a customer who reaches out to your technicians. You've all hired fantastic, intelligent, and enthusiastic staff. They get the request and saying, "Hey, can I get some help with my SharePoint site? I want to migrate it over and rebuild it." If they have the permissions in the Entra environment to do that, they may take that on and start working on that without getting it properly scoped, and recognize like, oh, that's additional project work. If they don't have the permissions for it, that gives you as the business owner, or your BDR team to reach out and say, hey, absolutely, it's going to be special project work. It's going to take us X number of hours at X dollars per hour. Here's the relationship request that we're sending off. And it's we're gonna the request is for 60 days, 30 days of which are work up front to get it up and running. The other 30 days are any change that we need to make. And then your team can get added to the security group for a special security group for SharePoint administration, for that work. Just an example to use of beyond just the security measures there. Will the slides be shared after the session? Absolutely. Apologies. So determining the roles for the security group. Again, we've kind of broken out here standard tier one, tier two, tier three security team members. Um, Tier one, we've given them help desk administrator and service support administrator. Tier two, user exchange, Intune, and license administrator. Tier three, we've given global administrator, privilege role administrator, and security administrator. These ones will set up with PIM approval where they need to have a manager or someone specific to second that. Um, this little drawing here I added. You can imagine each circle is a tier. So for my tier two team or tier one, they only have this security group, the L1 support security group. My tier two, I'm going to give them both the L2 and L1 security group, and the roles are additive. And then my tier three, I'm going to add them to all three security groups. So that way my tier three has everything, even though with global administrator, they don't need it. Ideally, you don't have global administrator on any of the roles there. But again, with the security group, as a if I can draw on the screen here, I can. They are additive, so you don't need to have if there are 15 total roles here, and I go 5 and 5 and 5 just to keep my numbers easy. I don't need to then create a second security group here of 10, which have these 5 and these 5, and this one here's 15. I can just add them all. I can add each user. So if there's a user here, they can be a part of all three security groups and they get all those roles. I could do it where tier three is also part of a security group that has all 15. That also totally works. I just find that this is also an easy way to keep track of. What are the most common mistakes you see with security group setups? The most common mistake that I see is it kind of falls back onto the relationship. An MSP would request like 73 roles, which I believe is every role minus global administrator. And then so they haven't done the work to determine what are they actually doing for their customers. From there, they go, okay, we've got our security group. And the security group, everybody gets those roles. And then all of their technicians are all part of that security group. So everybody has all the roles into the customer's environment. Um, Again, I think that that comes from a place of the MSP industry. You guys are dealing with many things all at once. It's very busy. Actually, sitting down to do this work can take time, depending on how deep you go into it. Um, and you don't want to slow yourself down. Um, when I jumped on so many calls where it's sorry, I was late, just putting out a fire for another customer. Oh, sorry, I got to hop off this call early. There's another fire that I've got to put out. So I think that's the main area where I see problems within security group setup. Once people start getting into the habit of requesting the relationships with the 15 or 20 roles that they make, again, same thing. It's not breaking it out into the security groups per user. So you have 3 security groups here. It's just the singular one. Um, so just not taking it up to that next level. And PIM, I think, is a step even above this. If you were to actually get to the work of doing 15 roles on the relationship or 20 roles in the relationship, and then security group 1, 2, and 3, they each get 15, 5, and 5, or whatever the numbers work out to, I think that puts you ahead of a lot, like that resolves a lot of any potential problems. And again, this doesn't require special licensing to do it. PIM is a P2 feature or a P1 add-on, and I'm going to get to that in a few slides here. So if you're just doing this without PIM, I think that's a really strong foundation to be on. What if the customer tenant uses PIM role groups rather than individual roles? Um, this is specific to the MSP's tenant, and doesn't tie into how your customer's using PIM roles, um, uh, or PIM role groups. Um, so I think that's not tied into to where this plays. Um, the one other component within PIM, and this applies for the roles and for the groups, and is the difference between eligible and permanently assigned. This is something that took me a little bit of time to fully appreciate what it means, because there's 2 different dates to consider. A user is eligible but has to activate to gain membership access to these security groups. It's temporary and auto revokes after a set duration. The 2 components to it are that it you can set the review or like they are eligible for it up to a year. And you might think, well, I'm expecting this employee to stay with me forever. I don't want to have to review it after each year. Again, that flows back into the least privileged access um, principle of, do they actually need these permissions? Have like we as a business changed so that we need to adjust who actually has what requirements? Um, and gives you, it forces that review period, which again, if you've done any compliance work, you know that you have to do that periodically anyways. So it's a good way of making sure that you don't forget that. You don't have a panicked period just before your compliance audit of getting that work done. If they are permanently assigned, again, use it sparingly. Recommendation is use it for break glass accounts. If you have a service account that requires 24-hour access for those roles, this is actually an interesting scenario that I'm going to talk about in a little bit with augment and service accounts. And any scenario where just in time isn't feasible. To be honest, nothing really jumped to mind around that. But again, because access is always on, it breaks just in time, which it breaks zero trust. And so unless there's a good justification for it, always use eligible. And I'll show you what the difference looks like in the app there. Like I mentioned, is PIM. All this obviously coming from Microsoft. It is a paid feature. So it's either a P2, it is a P2 feature. So it's either $9 per user per month, um, and it comes included with an E5 or E5 security license. You can get it as an add-on for Entra ID governance, which gives you PIM and access review and entitlement management. The question of who needs a license is an interesting one, because not everybody necessarily needs to have a P2 license, just anybody who's actually protected with PIM. So if you have a salesperson who's never going to need access to these PIM assigned groups, they don't need a PIM equivalent or PIM powered license. Um, but anybody who's eligible for assignment or who manages assignment or manages approvals or rejections or access reviews needs to have a license. Um, but the one thing to call out, I've heard this from a number of MSPs. I believe that with your partner benefit program, you get a number of E5 licenses included. I can't speak to the exactly how many, but I think it's between 25 and 35 licenses. So check in your partner center for your benefits there, and make sure you use them. Microsoft kind of giving this to you as a way to get you familiar with these features to be able to sell them as a value for your customers. So very text heavy summary. Again, starts with the role planning. I think the biggest the kind of going back to the question of where common mistakes that see people make with security groups, is MSPs not having a strong understanding of what it is that they actually are contracted to do with their customers. And then from there, mapping it to what roles do they actually need to accomplish it. Avoiding global administrator unless absolutely necessary. Creating those security groups in your environment, um, and then configuring the settings on those security groups with PIM, which I'll demonstrate here shortly here. Um, Using time-bound eligibility, monitoring and review because of those 6 months to 12 months eligibility, you're going to be constantly reviewing them. Again, set up a list of users who are going to receive the notifications for who's requested what permission and when. It doesn't necessarily fall on the reviewer, because again, you can configure these security group requests to be pre-approved, as long as they have certain information included. Um, Managing it within your GDAP configuration, creating those templates within Lighthouse. I haven't spent a tremendous amount of time playing around with Lighthouse myself. My understanding is that you can create these templates for the security groups and relationships, um, which will help streamline this process. I know that if you have 50, 100, 200 customers within the partner center, and I'm telling you, hey, you need to go in and configure 3 security groups per relationship with these roles, it can seem like a lot of work. And it is one of those things where you do it once and then you can kind of relax about it. Um, and then document everything, make sure it's very well established. When you have when you're sending out a new relationship request, what is it that we as an MSP are requesting? Who gets assigned to what groups? What are the jobs that are entitled to those? And then just add into your training what the activation process is within the partner center and Entra to get those roles. Before I jump into the demo, does anybody have any questions that I can answer? Okay, one moment. Let me just get my screen up. Someone asked in the chat, what specific partner benefit did you mention? My understanding, and I haven't looked into this specifically recently, but within the partner center, you should get an X amount of included. I believe it's E5 licenses as part of your partner benefit program. Um, that Okay. I believe I'm still sharing the correct screen. Oh, one moment. This is a technical. Funny, and my mouse batteries have just died. Try to revive them. One moment. Okay, I'm gonna have to be right back. I'm gonna go get new batteries. One moment. Let me see if it was the batteries or if it was my mouse. It's actually decided today. Um, Levi in the chat, what's the security benefit of a battery mouse versus a wired mouse? Um, there's too many to even discuss right now. If you want to have a one-on-one afterwards, Levi, we can chat about it. Okay. Um, Now that seems to be working for me again. Apologies for that. So, where I wanted to start with within Entra is to talk about the setting up of the actual groups. I know you all have hundreds and hundreds of different groups in your environment, so you may not need to do this work. Um, Again, the one thing I wanted to call out um, is just having the owners assigned and the members. You can set this up as a dynamic group. Um, and you can actually nest those groups inside other groups if you chose to. In this case, I'm going to set up this security group. I'm going to call it my tier tier one help help desk, and it's my group ships. I'm not going to assign any roles. I'm going to assign an owner. I'm going to come over here and say David and create. So now that I have this group set up, I'm going to go over to privileged identity management within here. And you can see I've got 4 groups right now, some from a previous demo. Clicking on discover groups is going to let me add that. I'm going to onboard this group. So I'm onboarding it onto PIM. And now I can see I have my security group within PIM. Um, so that's how you get them to show up into this list. They've made some changes to that workflow. But now that I'm in PIM with the security group, so I've already gone through the work within my partner center. I have my relationship with my customer. I know the roles that I have on there. Um, it's now syncing. I'm going to go to my relationship here. You can click on security groups, and I'd expect if Microsoft is happy with me, there we are. I believe I spelled tier wrong too. So again, going back to it, I do see a problem. People coming in here and just selecting all. That's not what we want to do. We've already done the work. We know that my tier one uh, team, they're going to have user administrator and they're going to have license administrator and password administrator. Those are the permissions that I want them to have. Click on save. And now anybody who's part of my tier one help desk group has those permissions in my customer's environment without having to create a new account, without having to create having like shared accounts within the partner center. And that would be if the security groups are consistent across all of your customers, it's the same across all of your customers. Um, So it helps reduce any data errors on that front. But we want to make sure that who's accessing this group is actually meant to be accessing this group, and add some restrictions around it. So in PIM, there's two different settings. There's owner and there's member. I'm going to select the member settings. And this one here, it's my tier one. I'm going to let them set it up for 8 hours. My help desk team, they come online, they can request these permissions. And for their entire workday, they have user administrator, license and password administrator into all my customers. That's fine. I'm not going to have them require justification. There's no approvers needed. There's no approvers needed to activate. There's no ticket requirement that I'm going to set up there. It is not. I'm not going to let anybody set up for permanently eligible. We don't want that. It's only temporary eligible. And then every year, members have to have that review. Do people actually need these permissions? Is it being used correctly for these people? There's more information here that I'm going to get into as we get into like the next tier security groups, but identifying who gets what alert when, who's going to be the approver, where do those alerts get sent to, is all something that you can configure. The one thing I am going to change here though, if I click on edit and I go over here, require Azure MFA on active assignment. So every time someone goes in to request that assignment, they may have already requested MFA to get into their Entra environment. We're going to request it again. Just so that way we can help prevent any potential cookie hijacking that the user may be victim to. And then again, on the notification side of things, you can set it up so that way any of the recipients are who you want to actually receive those roles. But in this case, it's just the setting up to the default. So I'm going to click on update. Once it gets through the Microsoft minute of saving, the one thing that I like to also call out is for my tier one, when you add assignments, this is who is actually going to be a member to this. Like I mentioned, you can do it as nested groups. If you've already done the work for your level ones, your pre-existing security groups can be added to this, but you can also do it as a group as well. But in this case, I'm just going to select the top 4 users here, and they are members. Next, and you can see it's eligible for them, and the assignment starts today, and the assignment ends a year from now. See, it's working its way through. Now we're going to build one that requires a little bit more sophistication around the alerts and what's actually going to be required there. So going back over to groups, new group, security. Yeah, I knew I spelled tier wrong. Need another coffee today. Tier, starting to tier 3, high privilege. Group. Membership is assigned. I'm going to give myself an owner. And again, you can do membership assignment here, or after the fact once you've actually set up PIM for them. In this case, I'll just do it while I'm here. And then privileged identity management, discover group, tier 3, high privileged, manage that group, onboarded over into PIM. I'm going to edit the settings. Yep, yeah. The question in the chat: are you able to skip the assign enter roles because the roles are defined in the partner center? Yeah, and that's where things get a little bit confused. The if I go roles on the security group, these are roles in your Entra environment, completely disconnected from what's going on in the partner center. So you could have like members of this security group. I could add like global admin here, but on the relationship, this one only has user administrator. So even though they're global admin here, they're only able to do user administrator work there. So it's a little bit confusing. That's why I do like to have like the security groups separate from what your internal security groups provide them with. So if you do any role based assignment via groups, either having the membership assigned by those groups to a separate security group that is specific for PIM and GDAP is a way to go, or have a completely separate security group that ties into the GDAP relationships. Um, Going back into tier 3, high privileged, again, going membership. I'm going to edit this. This is going to be for my super privileged access on activation, require MFA, require justification, require ticket, and require approver to activate. In this case, we're going to go my first name, last name, 137 and 156. Those are my two approvers. You can do it by groups as well. Assignment, it's not eligibly assignment. It's not permanently active assignment. Again, require MFA on active assignment. Notifications, I want it also to go to myself as well. And you can choose who gets what. You don't want to necessarily bombard everybody with every email type, so you can customize it based off of your needs. Just double checking. I'm going to review. This all looks good. Update. And so now the members of this group who want to gain access to this group, when they request access, it then has to be approved by someone who's on the listed approvers, which are these two members here. And you can make as few or as many as you want for the approvers. So the way in which this kind of looks like for workflow for your customers, I'm sure you're all very, or for your team, um, it's pretty straightforward. I like to think once you kind of get familiar with it. Again, I have PIM. I've got it favorited over here, so it's easy for me to access. Coming over to here, my roles and groups. I know what groups I need to request. I actually, in my account that I have right now, um, I don't actually have any set up as eligible. But what you would see is you'd see, oh, my level 2 help desk, level 3 help desk. You would click it, request permission. It then sends off a request to the approver if that's required, or it just automatically grants me that assignment. I can see in my assignments if it's assigned and what the end time is. When I've been on calls with MSPs in the past who have had a really good PIM setup going on, they usually go in, they'll request their roles, and then I'll hear them shout across the office, "Hey, I just sent you a PIM request. Can you approve it for me?" Again, the value to that is making sure that the people who have the permissions get the permissions that they need when they need them. The other interesting thing to call out as well, I know we've kind of mentioned a few times now that they don't want global administrator tied to the relationships. You can have multiple relationships on each customer. So if you do find yourself not wanting to have a global admin account natively in your customer's partner center, which again, Microsoft doesn't want you to do. They want your customer to have only your customer users in their environment and the MSP to have their users in their environment use relationships to gain that access. You can request a new relationship, have it for global admin, um, and then have the security group enrollment be limited to security groups that are completely disconnected from the principal relationship that you have with the 15 or 20 or 30 so roles that you actually conduct with your customer on a day-to-day basis. That's just another layer there. Does anybody have any questions on the workflow for PIM, the tying it in? Feel as though that was a lot that I kind of got through relatively quickly. Yeah, Matthew comment in the chat. There's still some functionality that can be done. One of the interesting things that I noticed was, and I'm sure that there's more examples of it, even though my relationship had a global admin in my test customer environment, I couldn't see the other relationships that they had with other partners. Um, because I guess that makes sense. Microsoft doesn't want an MSP to be able to see what other potential MSPs are connected with. But yeah, there is definitely things that a global admin isn't always an equal global admin, um, which is frustrating. Um, but yeah, we're being restricted only with senior staff with justification. And again, those accounts locked down within your password manager, being able to audit who's requested those credentials. Is all part of the concepts of just in time least privilege access. So it's just the same thing that PIM's trying to do, just deployed in a slightly different way. Any other further questions? Again, this slide deck and the webinar is going to be sent out from Levi and his team after the fact. If you have any other questions, my email can be included in that. I'm sure Levi can include that for you. If not, thank you all for your time. Hope there was some value taken away from this one. Cheers. Have a good one. Happy holidays.